Hello.
I wasn't supposed to be staying at my mom's friend's house for more than a few days. A week at most. Just enough time for my apartment lease to kick in after graduation. But plans shifted, renovations ran late, and somehow I ended up in Monica's guest room for the entire month of June. She didn't mind, or at least she didn't show it. If anything, she welcomed the company. The house was big, older, and a little too quiet when she was alone. Her daughter, my childhood friend, had moved out last year, and Monica had been living solo ever since. I remembered her as the fun mom growing up. The one who let us eat popcorn on the couch and watch PG-13 movies way before we were supposed to. She used to wear denim shorts and vintage band tees, always had chipped nail polish, and smelled like coconut sunscreen even in winter. I never thought twice about her back then. She was just Monica, my mom's wild, funny best friend. But this time felt different. Maybe it was because I was older, or maybe because she was. Her energy had changed, calmer, slower, but somehow more magnetic. She didn't laugh as loud as before, but when she did, it landed differently. Like it was meant for someone who could appreciate it. Like it was meant for me. At first, I chalked it up to post-graduation stress and a wandering mind. I'd been burnt out, unsure of what came next, and living in someone else's home was messing with my head. But then there were the looks. The way she'd glance over the top of her reading glasses while sipping wine in the evening. The way she lingered in the kitchen doorway when I'd walk past in the mornings, wearing nothing but a robe tied loosely at the waist. Then came the touches. Small, meaningless ones on paper. A hand brushing mine when passing the TV remote. Her palm resting a second longer on my back as she walked by me in the narrow hallway. Always casual. Always just long enough to notice. One night, around the end of the second week, I came home late from a walk. The house was dark except for the dim light in the hallway. I kicked off my shoes and padded toward my room quietly, trying not to wake her. As I passed the living room, I noticed her curled up on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, watching some old black and white film. She looked up and smiled, her hair loose around her shoulders. Couldn't sleep either? I went for a walk, I said. Didn't mean to wake you. You didn't. She scooted over on the couch. Sit. Keep me company. I hesitated, but only for a second. The blanket was warm, the movie slow and quiet. For a while, we just sat there, shoulder to shoulder, barely speaking. I could smell the soft scent of her shampoo, something herbal and clean. At one point, she leaned forward to grab her tea from the coffee table, and her shoulder pressed into mine. She didn't move away. Neither did I. After a few more minutes, she sighed. You've changed a lot since high school. I glanced at her. In a good way? She looked at me, her eyes a little heavier now. In a very noticeable way. I didn't know what to say to that, so I said nothing, just nodded. Eventually, she yawned and stood, the blanket falling away from her lap. I should sleep. Yeah, I said. Me too. She turned back as she reached the hallway, her silhouette lit softly from behind. Night, sweetheart. Sweetheart. She hadn't called me that since I was 12. It echoed in my head long after I went to bed. That night I couldn't sleep. I tossed and turned, the sheets suddenly too warm. My mind replayed everything. Her voice, her smile, the curve of her leg under the blanket when she shifted. I hated myself for thinking that way. She was Monica, my mom's best friend. She was almost twice my age. But it didn't stop the thoughts. The next day was quiet. We barely saw each other. I kept busy fixing the door in the laundry room like she'd asked. She went out to get groceries and came back late. We exchanged quick hellos and goodnights. It almost felt normal again. Almost. But I still felt that shift. like something unspoken had been set in motion the night before and couldn't be undone. That night, as I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, I told myself I was overthinking it, that I just needed sleep, that tomorrow would reset everything. Then came the knock. Soft, barely audible. I turned toward the door, still half asleep. A second later, it opened just an inch. "Are you awake?" came Monica's voice. A whisper. I sat up. "Yeah, everything okay?" She pushed the door open slowly and stepped inside. She was barefoot, wearing a loose tank top and flannel shorts, her hair in a messy bun. The hallway light behind her cast her in silhouette. Her voice was low, steady. "Come with me." I blinked. "What's going on?" She glanced back down the hallway, then back at me. And then she said it. "Just don't let anyone hear us." Her words hung in the air longer than they should have. Don't let anyone hear us. I stared at her for a second, still halfway between sleep and confusion. "What do you mean?" She didn't answer right away, just gave a slight tilt of her head toward the hallway, as if to say, "Come on, now's not the time for questions." So I got up. My shirt was wrinkled, hair a mess, and I was still groggy. But none of that seemed to matter. She turned without another word and padded softly down the hall. I followed. The house was dim, lit only by the golden glow of under-cabinet lights in the kitchen. Outside it was still dark, barely past 5, maybe. Birds weren't even up yet. The silence felt sacred. She led me to the laundry room. Or, technically, the narrow closet beside it, the one with the broken shelf she'd mentioned needing help with last week. "I tried to fix it yesterday," she whispered, "but the screws are stripped. I think the frame is warped." I blinked. "You woke me up for that?" Monica turned slowly, lips twitching like she was holding back a smile. "I didn't want to forget again. And you said you're better with tools than I am. Remember?" I raised an eyebrow. "You said, 'Don't let anyone hear us.' That's a pretty dramatic way to ask for help with a shelf." She didn't answer at first, just stepped into the closet and pointed toward the upper corner. "Can you see if it's loose?" I stepped inside, close behind her. The space was tight, maybe 2 feet wide. The kind of space you didn't share with someone unless you had to. I reached up, running my hand along the shelf. It wobbled slightly. "You're right. Screws are loose, and the wall anchor's stripped." She looked up at me, her face suddenly very close to mine. So it's fixable. But I need tools. A new anchor, probably a drill." She didn't move. Neither did I. "That'll make noise," she said softly. I nodded. "Yeah, probably." For a few seconds, we just stood there, facing each other in that cramped, dim space. I could smell the minty undertones of her toothpaste, the warmth of her skin, the soft cotton scent of whatever detergent she used. She hadn't put on a bra, and I caught myself noticing the way the fabric of her tank top clung to her lightly, naturally, not on purpose, but noticeable. She must have seen something shift in my expression, because her eyes narrowed just slightly, not suspicious, but thoughtful. "I didn't mean to freak you out," she said after a long beat. "I just didn't want your mom to hear us moving around this early. She's a light sleeper." I nodded slowly. "Makes sense." Monica exhaled through her nose, then brushed past me to get out of the closet. Her shoulder grazed my chest as she moved, and I felt my breath catch. Not from the contact itself, but from how casual it was. Deliberate, maybe, or maybe not. "Coffee?" she asked over her shoulder as she walked back toward the kitchen. I followed. "Sure." The coffee maker hissed quietly as it brewed. She stood at the counter, one hand on her hip, the other twisting the tie from her bun and letting her hair fall. It looked damp, like she'd showered an hour ago. That realization did something strange to my stomach. You always wake up this early? I asked. She shrugged. Sometimes. Depends on the dream. I leaned against the fridge. Good one or bad one? She glanced at me, that familiar smirk touching the edge of her mouth. Can't remember. We sipped coffee in silence for a while. The kind of silence that doesn't need filling, but doesn't feel empty either. Then, casually, Monica asked, "Have you figured out what's next yet?" I blinked. "After the lease starts?" "No," she said. "I mean next. Like, real next." I hesitated. "Not really. Everyone keeps asking, and I keep giving different answers. It's like, I don't know what I'm supposed to want yet." Her gaze softened. "You don't have to know. That's the lie people tell you after graduation, that you should have it all figured out by now." "And you?" I asked. "Did you know what you wanted at 22? Monica smiled into her coffee mug. "God, no. I was a mess at 22. Thought I had everything planned out. Then I met your mom. Then I met your dad. Then I married someone else." I laughed. "That's comforting." "It should be," she said, walking past me to the table. "Most people don't figure it out until they've already lived half of it." I sat across from her, and for a moment, it felt like we weren't 10 years apart, like we were just two people in the quiet part of the morning, sharing something fragile. She looked at me then, really looked, and said, "You remind me of him." I tilted my head. "Of who?" She paused. "Your dad. When he was young. The way you listen. The way you move when you think no one's watching." The air thickened. "I didn't know you noticed how I move," I said, my voice lower than I expected. She didn't flinch. "I notice a lot more than you think." There was a beat of silence. And then she said it again. "You shouldn't let anyone hear us." I blinked. "Why do you keep saying that?" Monica leaned forward slightly, resting her chin in her palm. Her eyes were clear, calm. "Because sometimes," she said, "the quietest moments are the loudest when the wrong people are listening." I didn't answer. Couldn't. Because for the first time since I arrived at her house, I wasn't just confused or intrigued or curious. I was certain something was happening, and I didn't know how far it would go. But I knew I wasn't going back to sleep. The rest of the house was still sleeping. You could feel it in the air, the hush of early morning, thick and undisturbed. No clatter of pans, no hallway footsteps. Just the hum of the refrigerator and the occasional soft tap of rain starting against the window. Monica's words were still echoing in my head. "You shouldn't let anyone hear us." I wasn't even sure what she meant anymore. Or maybe I was, and that was the problem. She stood up suddenly and carried her empty mug to the sink. "There's something in the garage I need help with. Can you come for a second?" I blinked. "Right now." She looked over her shoulder, her face unreadable. "You said you weren't going back to sleep." So I followed her. The garage was dark except for the single low bulb near the workbench. She flipped the switch and shadows stretched across the cement floor. The air was cooler there, damp, like the scent of summer storms and cardboard. She pointed toward an old shelving unit stacked with random storage bins. "That one up there, I think it's about to tip. I tried to reach it last week, but I didn't want it falling on me." I walked over and pressed gently against the bin. "Yeah, it's heavy. I'll move it down." I stepped onto the edge of a crate to reach the top. As I shifted the container, the shelf creaked. I turned to say something, and nearly lost my balance. Her hands caught my waist instantly, steadying me. "Careful," she whispered. We froze like that, her hands on me, my back half turned to her. The bin balanced in my hands, and for the first time, neither of us pulled away. I slowly placed the bin on the workbench. She didn't move. Her hands were still there, And when I turned around, we were close. Too close. You okay? She asked softly, her voice barely a breath. I nodded. But I wasn't. Not in the way she meant. Because everything about that moment felt wrong. And at the same time, it felt inevitable. Her eyes met mine, searching. Not with hesitation, but with something deeper. She wasn't confused. She was waiting, testing, like she'd already crossed a line in her mind and was just seeing if I'd follow. I didn't mean to make you uncomfortable, she said quietly. You didn't. You sure? I'm sure. Her hands slipped away from my waist, slowly, like she wasn't in a hurry to break contact. Then she stepped back, giving me space but not distance. I used to change your diapers, she said with a soft laugh, as if trying to reset something in her head. Now look at you, taller than me, voice deeper than your dad's. And that look in your eyes, I don't even recognize it. I swallowed. People change. They do. She paused. But not usually while you're watching. That line hit me in the center of my chest. I looked at her, really looked. Her tank top clung slightly to her skin, still damp from the humidity. A strand of hair had fallen loose near her collarbone. Her lips were parted slightly, as if she was about to say something else and changed her mind. I noticed the way you look at me, she said suddenly. You try not to, but you do. I didn't deny it. There was no point anymore. And the thing is, she continued, stepping just a little closer, I don't mind. My pulse roared in my ears. Couldn't breathe right. I felt like the air in the garage had been replaced with something thicker, slower, charged. She was right in front of me now, close enough that I could see the flecks of green in her otherwise hazel eyes, close enough to feel the warmth off her skin. You know this is insane, right? I asked. She gave a crooked smile. I know. This shouldn't be happening. It isn't. Not really. But it is. Her hand lifted, slow, careful, and brushed lightly against my arm. Just fingertips. Barely anything. But it was enough to send a current through my entire body. Why are you doing this? I whispered. Her answer came after a pause. Because I've spent too long pretending not to feel things I clearly feel. And you haven't looked at me like a mom's friend in days. Maybe longer. I stared at her, every muscle in my body tight, unsure if I should step forward or walk away. But she leaned in first. Not for a kiss, not for a touch, just close enough that I could hear her breathing. You think I don't hear you moving around late at night? She whispered. You think I didn't see the way you looked at me when I wore that blue robe? I didn't mean. You meant it, she said softly. And it's okay. I did too. She pulled back slightly, eyes still locked on mine. But if we're gonna pretend nothing's happening, she added, we should go back inside before the sun comes up. I didn't move. You're the one who said not to let anyone hear us, I said finally. She smiled again. I said that for a reason. Which is, because I don't regret feeling this way, she said. But I don't need the whole house to know it before I figure out what it means. We stood there in the silence, the air around us buzzing with everything unsaid. And then she stepped past me toward the door, hand brushing mine as she went. I'm making pancakes, she said, voice lighter now. If you don't show up in 10 minutes, I'll know you're hiding. She didn't wait for a response. She left me standing there in the half-lit garage, the bin still on the workbench, my pulse racing, my thoughts spinning, my entire world tilted sideways. And for the first time since arriving, I realized this wasn't something that might happen. It already had. I didn't go back to bed. Couldn't. I stood in the garage for another 5 minutes after she left, just staring at the empty space where she'd been. My body felt like it was holding too much heat, too much energy, like the moment had stayed behind, echoing off the cement walls. Eventually, I went back inside. The kitchen lights were on now, brighter than before, and the house had started to stir. The sound of the faucet running, the cabinet closing, birds, finally awake, chirping outside the window like it was any other summer morning. But nothing felt like any other anymore. She was at the stove, flipping pancakes in a pan like nothing had happened. Like we hadn't stood inches apart in a dim garage with that silence wrapped around us like a secret. She looked over her shoulder when I stepped in. "Morning again. Morning," I said, keeping my voice even. "Coffee's fresh." I poured a cup and leaned against the counter, watching her move. Calm, fluid, familiar. She wore the same tank top and shorts, but now with a soft cardigan thrown over her shoulders. Her hair was tied up loosely again, a few strands falling along her neck. "Hope you're hungry," she said. "I made extra." I nodded. "Always am." She smiled but didn't meet my eyes. Not really. That part had changed. As we set the table, we moved in rhythm. No small talk, no awkward fumbling. Just a quiet understanding in the way we passed plates and refilled glasses. It felt practiced, like we'd done this 100 times. And maybe we had. But now it was different. Every motion was loaded with something else. Something unsaid. Halfway through eating, we heard footsteps upstairs. My mom. Monica glanced at the ceiling, then lowered her voice automatically. "I think she's awake." I just nodded. There it was again, that invisible thread pulling tight between us. She hadn't said anything suspicious, hadn't even looked guilty, but still it was there. After a few minutes, my mom came down the stairs, still in pajamas. "Oh wow, pancakes. I didn't know we were getting the deluxe treatment this morning." Monica laughed lightly. "Woke up early. Figured I'd do something nice." My mom poured coffee and joined us. "Smells amazing. You two up early too?" Monica answered smoothly. "He helped me move a few things in the garage." Mom looked at me. "That's sweet of you." I smiled, forced and brief. "Just being useful." Conversation drifted into normal topics, vacuuming, groceries, a movie someone had mentioned. I chimed in where I needed to, but my eyes kept wandering. To her fingers wrapped around her mug, to the way she kept her gaze on the table a second longer than needed. We barely looked at each other, but we didn't need to. Everything was already understood. After breakfast, I rinsed my plate and slipped away upstairs. I heard my mom turn on the TV in the living room, some news show murmuring in the background. I sat on the edge of my bed, elbows on my knees, heart still pounding low and steady like a second heartbeat I couldn't calm. My phone buzzed. A text. "Monica, thanks for not making it weird." I stared at it for a while, then replied, "I'm not sure I know how to feel yet." A minute passed. Then her response. "That's okay. Neither do I." I didn't text back right away. Just lay down and stared at the ceiling, trying to make sense of how quickly everything had shifted. A week ago, she was just my mom's best friend. Someone who made great coffee, told stories about the 90s, and wore oversized sweatshirts when it rained. Now she was something else. Not a fantasy. Not an accident. Something real. And as strange as it was, I didn't feel scared. I didn't feel guilty. I felt aware. Later that afternoon, when my mom went out for errands, Monica knocked gently on my door. She didn't open it, just leaned in close enough for her voice to carry through the wood. "I'm going for a walk," she said. "If you want to come." I stood, grabbed my shoes, and followed her out the back door. We didn't talk much as we walked. The sky was pale and wide, the air warm and quiet. Our arms brushed once, then again. She didn't pull away. Neither did I. When we reached the bend in the trail behind the neighborhood, She stopped. Did you think I was playing with you? She asked suddenly. No, I said. She turned toward me, brushing a leaf off her sweater. Good. There was a pause. Then she looked up and added, I meant it. What I said this morning. Which part? She held my gaze. All of it. And that was the moment I knew this wasn't going to fade. Not tomorrow. Not when I moved out. Not even years from now. This wasn't just something that happened. It was the start of something we'd both already stepped into. And whether we liked it or not, neither of us had looked back.
Bye bye.